Is the era of the compact truck back? As someone who once drove cross-country in a 1998 Ford Ranger, I hope so. I really like that truck. Small trucks make a lot of sense for those of us who want something with a bit of utility, but don't want to drive one of these monsters currently roaming the road. That's why the compact truck is back, and one of the best options in this space is this, the 2022 Ford Maverick. Sure, some of you aren't gonna love the name, that's a bit of a Ford problem at the moment, but do any of you really have fond memories of the OG Maverick and its flame-spitting 120 horsepower straight six? This Maverick looks great. It takes the familiar truck proportions and scales them appropriately. There's a bit of crossover-esque language in the nose, but all in all it looks good, and the available paint colors are great too. I do think it's silly that literally every truck out there has to stamp its name in the back of the tailgate, but honestly, the Maverick lettering here doesn't look that bad. And this bed, despite looking tiny, is... okay, so it is pretty small, but with the tailgate down, you do have 79 inches to play with, and that means you have room for toys and tools. And then with this up and a mountain bike pad on here, I can easily fit my XL 29er mountain bike in the back. In the cabin, we've got more good news. This space manages to look inexpensive and cool at the same time. The materials add good character, the seats are wickedly comfortable, and the screen is clear and responsive. Though it does sit at a slightly odd downward angle, I feel like I want to adjust it a little bit. With respect to power, you have two options, and surprisingly, the hybrid setup is the base one. You have a 2.5-liter four-cylinder that pairs with two electric motors to deliver a combined output of 191 horsepower. The transmission here is a CVT, and this one is front-wheel drive only. Jump up to the 2-liter Turbo 4 though, and you now have 250 horsepower, an 8-speed automatic, and a choice between front-wheel drive or all-wheel drive. So I'm pleasantly surprised to report that the hybrid, the base engine, is pretty fun to drive. It doesn't have a ton of horsepower and torque, but it puts it down nicely, and this thing is peppier than you'd expect it to be. Just cruising around in normal mode, it's easy to go in and out of the hybrid driving experience so that you can get good fuel economy. In fact, this thing is rated to return 42 miles per gallon in the city, and I believe it. The long-term miles per gallon display is in the 30s, but every time I do a shorter drive, I'm easily over 40 miles per gallon. It's when I dip into the available sport mode that I dip the overall miles per gallon. And it is fun to dip into sport mode. There's a button down here. There's normal, there's tow haul, which is kind of funny, slippery, eco, and sport. And then in sport, it just kind of, I mean, it's not making good noise, but it pulls harder than you expect. Still, I really want to drive the EcoBoost version of this so I can experience the difference with the 8-speed automatic. This CVT isn't soul-sucking. The CVT in this is fine. An 8-speed is probably better, but also with the EcoBoost, 250 horsepower, 277 pound-feet of torque. If I'm having fun in the hybrid, that means I should have a lot more fun in the 2-liter. Regardless, I'm happy that this base engine is good. It's a shame they can't use the electric motors to create a different type of all-wheel drive setup for this one. Electric all-wheel drive would be a really neat option on this, but I'm sure the packaging of that gets into a bit of difficulty with under-the-bed packaging, whereas with the 2-liter, you just get, you just send a drive shaft out back and you deal with that like a traditional truck. Speaking of traditional truck stuff, this does have a payload of 1,500 pounds. So if you can fit 1,500 pounds worth of stuff in the back, that's a pretty good payload figure. I know some people are like, oh, it's not a real truck, 1,500 pounds. Well, compare that to real trucks like the Ford Raptor and the Ram TRX, which can barely use their full payload capacity, and they have technically smaller payloads than this thing. Now, you can argue on the towing side, this version can tow 2,000 pounds, but if you get the 2-liter EcoBoost all-wheel drive and the tow package, you can tow up to 4,000 pounds, and 4,000 pounds is decent for a small truck. However, I will point out that the Hyundai Santa Cruz can tow 5,000 pounds. That's a lot more pounds, 1,000 more. But just from a general driving happiness perspective, the seats are very comfortable. I like looking at this, what is probably a very cheap material to produce, but the interior materials have a charm to them. They almost look like they have a 3D printed aesthetic, and I appreciate them. And then there's smart design features on the inside too, like there's a cutout in the door for larger water bottles. There's a bit of color in here. Another neat feature is what is called FITS. It stands for Ford's Integrated Tether System. It's basically like a little locking port where they can 3D print things to add to make their Maverick experience better, like cup holders and trays and all sorts of things, including things in the bed as well. So the smart people who will grab these schematics to really offer up fits, enhancements, that could be a really neat little side hustle for some people. In fact, there are already a few Etsy stores of people designing, building, and selling things that fit into the fits system. That's kind of neat. It's different, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's something you see more of in the future in other automobiles, because 3D printing is becoming more accessible and cheaper and all that. But back to the actual driving experience. It brakes well. It gives you a brake coach so you can see if you're returning enough energy into this hybrid version. The steering feel is fine. It's a little rubbery, but I'm not expecting it to be sports car-like. I feel like it's really good for what it is in the hybrid. And again, that's why I want to drive the EcoBoost, because I bet that one is even more entertaining. Not that a small compact truck is supposed to be entertaining, but this isn't boring, this isn't lifeless, this is a great driving experience, especially when you remember how little you paid to get here. With a small truck comes a surprisingly smaller price tag than you might expect. Everything is too expensive these days, and the Maverick thankfully bucks that trend. The base price of an XL Maverick is $21,490. An XLT starts at $23,855 and adds 17-inch wheels, cruise control, power mirrors, and a bit more. The Lariat gives you keyless entry and push start, amongst other things, and jumps to $27,355. If you want the 2-liter on any trim, it's an extra $1,085. All-wheel drive adds another $3,305. This XLT is priced just over $27,000, and that's a pretty good deal. Heck, any car under $30 these days is an amazing deal. I just wish this one came with keyless entry and push-button start, but I think I'd get used to not having it. What I would get used to having is a smart-sized machine that is better suited to the task at hand than what people think they actually need. Listen, spend your money however you want, but with the Maverick, you're getting a stylish, comfortable, well-priced, well-sized thing that is good at what it does.